Is young adult fiction always told from a first-person point of view?
That's actually a great question. It is most YA books that I see are told from a first-person point of view. My books are not, and I actually do think that was a challenge in selling them. My books are written more like Game of Thrones. They're written in third-person alternating point of views. But that said, it is third-person close. So third-person omniscient is where more of like the God's perspective. Third-person close is where you're still in the character's point of view, but I'm writing it still in third person. So I am actually hoping that we're going to see more of that, because I think that it gives more scope to the way you tell a story, especially in a genre like the big science fiction types of stuff that I'm writing. But yeah, largely you see that, and I think part of that is that it is relatable, and that the voice of the character then really shines through. And first-person stories can be great too. I mean, the first book I ever wrote was in first person, and I haven't fully ruled out ever writing in it again, because I think it can be fun and can be done. The downside of it, and you can see it in series like Hunger Games, I love the first book. Hunger Games is told in a first-person narrative, but then, and it's a huge world, but as the books proceeded through the trilogy, and you're still locked into one point of view, it started to get very limiting by the third book, because you had this whole revolution going on, you had all these districts, and yet you weren't able to see that in the book. Whereas the film, it was able to open that up and show you everything, because a film, has that bigger perspective. So I think it can get limiting, especially if you're looking at telling a story over multiple volumes. So I'm hopeful that we'll see more third-person narratives. But yes, you do see a lot of the first person.
And second person?
Oh my gosh.
Is there such a thing? Yeah,
I had a writing student who was like, I'm writing in second person. And I was like, are you trying to make your life really hard? Not to say that it hasn't ever been done or can't be done. Every rule can be broken. I think, especially in a short story or something more experimental, you could probably get away with it or pull it off. Writing in second person through the scope of a novel, I think, would be extraordinarily difficult. Part of the reason is that, and I always tell my students this, is that I think it's worthwhile to always have your reader in mind, unless you just want to write books in your bedroom and nobody will read them and you're cool with that. But if you think you might want readers, you don't usually want to do anything that's going to totally throw them out of your narrative. Or lose them, and writing in second person can feel, I would think, distracting, just because it's not typically done. I mean, I don't even know that I can name a novel that's written all in second person. I think you could maybe get away with it in parts if you were trying to do something interesting, but you don't want to do anything that's going to really disorient somebody. Now, but I also always say every rule has been broken, will be broken, and there are incredible writers who are going to do things that I can't even fathom. So, but I would say, especially when you're first starting to write, don't do anything that's reinventing the wheel or that's going to make it too challenging for yourself, because it's already a huge challenge to finish a novel. It's like a huge deal. So I always recommend starting in first or third person, and a lot of times actually in first person. And the reason is that developing voice is, I think, one of the hardest things to do as a writer, and it is easier to do it in first person.
So going back to the first story that you wrote, the first novel, was that your intention to have other readers, or was this more for you, it was more personal?
I've always written because I would love to have readers. I started writing because I'm such a voracious reader, and I love nothing more than being caught in the middle of a story where it's keeping me up till 3 or 4 in the morning because I can't put it down. I think it's the single best thing in the world. So I kind of wanted to write books like that. I wanted to write books where people would stay up late at night reading them. That's probably the biggest compliment anyone could ever give me. So I started out thinking that I did want to publish. I did want to publish traditionally, ideally, and I did want other people to read my book. That said, I wrote the first one in first person because of the voice question. Like, I was trying to work very hard to develop voice as a writer, and like I mentioned, I think that's easier to do in first person. I had other reasons. My narrator is also unreliable. That's another good reason to write in first person. If for some reason you have a character that is not trustworthy, my character was an alcoholic, but she didn't know it and she wouldn't admit it. So it makes her an interesting narrator. The very popular book Girl on a Train uses a similar narrative technique, right, where the main character has blackouts and doesn't remember things. So she is inherently unreliable, and it makes for a very good thriller. So that's another reason to choose the narrator to be a certain tense. first person puts us in her POV, so we're beholden to what she thinks. But what if what she thinks isn't accurate?